Pigeons. I know, weird way to start a conversation, but hear me out. We see them all the time, strutting about in the city, pecking at chips, looking like they've just come back from a night out. But apparently, pigeons are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. In fact, they can recognize themselves in mirrors. No, really. There's this thing called the mirror test. Scientists put a little dot on the pigeon's neck, somewhere it can't see directly. If the pigeon notices it in the reflection and starts trying to get it off, it means they've realized, oh, that's me. It's a sign of self-awareness, something not many animals pass. Magpies can do it, dolphins can do it, and apparently ants can do it too, which is unsettling. I don't know about you, but I don't want to think about ants having a sense of self. Imagine stepping on one and it looking up like, why? Not a thought I needed today. And yet, we still call pigeons flying rats. It's unfair, really. These birds have been absolute legends throughout history. People used them for thousands of years to carry messages. Long before emails or WhatsApp, if you wanted to get a note to someone far away, you tie it to a pigeon's leg and let it do its thing. They were basically the original delivery service. Although I wouldn't trust them with a takeaway. You'd order a pizza, and half of it would mysteriously disappear before it arrived. But here's where it gets even cooler. Pigeons have built-in navigation systems that make GPS look like a cheap knockoff. In their beaks, they've got microscopic particles of iron that let them sense the Earth's magnetic field. Combine that with using the position of the sun and familiar landmarks, and you've got a bird that can be released hundreds of miles away, in a place it's never been before, and still find its way home. Meanwhile, I've got lost in my own street before, twice. Now that's not to say pigeons never mess it up. Some do. Racing pigeons have been known to vanish entirely. One from the UK turned up in Alabama in the US. Nobody knows how. My best guess. It hitched a ride on a ship, saw the weather, and thought, you know what? I live here now. But for every rogue traveler, there are thousands of pigeons that just quietly get the job done. They don't get lost. They don't need Google Maps. And they definitely don't need to stop and ask for directions. They're little feathered professionals who also happen to be able to look in a mirror and know exactly who they are. Which, frankly, is more than I can say for myself on most Monday mornings. So if pigeons can look in a mirror and go, yep, that's me, here's where it gets properly heroic. There's this pigeon from the First World War with the most wholesome, old-fashioned name, cher ami, which is French for dear friend. Not a bad start, is it? If you're going to rely on a bird in the middle of a war, you want it to be called something reassuring. Dear friend is better than, say, Kevin, the occasionally distracted. Quick picture of the time. Trenches, mud, unreliable radios, phone lines that got cut every time someone sneezed at a shell. If you wanted to get a message through, you either sent a runner, bad odds, or you strapped your note to a pigeon and hoped your feathery courier fancied a straight flight home rather than a detour to investigate an interesting bit of bread. And yet, against all the chaos, pigeons were often the most reliable option. Tiny winged postmen flying through smoke and shrapnel like it was just a windy Tuesday. Cher Ami belonged to the US Army Signal Corps, even though the name's French. International bird of mystery, basically. The story she's famous for happened in 1918, late in the war, when a group of American soldiers got cut off behind enemy lines. You might have heard them called the Lost Battalion. They weren't actually lost in the sense of where are we on the map, more like everyone else has moved and now we're stuck in the worst possible spot. No food, low ammo, surrounded, and to make it a proper nightmare, their own artillery started falling short. Friendly fire. Nothing friendly about it. They needed to tell their side to stop shelling the exact patch of forest they were clinging to. Runners were being shot or captured. Radios? Forget it. So they wrote a message, rolled it tight, popped it into a little canister, and tied it to Cherami's leg. And then, which is the bit that always catches me, they let her go. Imagine that moment. You're crouched in the mud, everything is exploding, and your best hope is a bird the size of a loaf of bread. You give her a little toss into the air and think, please, just fly. And off she went, straight into it. The thing about homing pigeons is they don't do drama. They don't make a speech about bravery. They just aim for home like an arrow. Only this time she got hit. Shell blast, bullets, debris. Different versions tell it differently. But the end result is grim either way. She takes damage mid-flight, drops, staggers, takes off again. When she finally reaches the loft, she's a state. One eye ruined, chest torn open, and the message leg, and this is the part people always remember, hanging by a thread. Literally. The tiny message capsule is still attached. It makes you wince just thinking about it. But the message was there. Coordinates. A simple, desperate line saying in effect, "You're hitting us. Stop." And because that message arrived, they shifted the barrage, and a couple of hundred men lived to complain about the food later. It's one of those moments where the whole giant machine of war, generals, maps, factories, trains, guns, boils down to a scrap of paper on a bird's leg. There's a version of this story where you can see the scene in your head, almost like a film. The loft keeper hears that frantic fluttering, not the calm, everyday, "Oh, hello, I'm home," but a ragged, last push burst. He reaches in, sees the mess of feathers and blood, spots the canister, and just sprints. Someone else reads it. The coordinates go up the chain, the guns shift left, and somewhere miles away, the world stops falling on the wrong patch of trees. You can feel the tension snap, like a wire that's been stretched too tight for too long. What gets me isn't just the survival against all odds. It's the total lack of ego in the whole thing. A pigeon doesn't know it's saving lives. It just knows home is that way, and it goes no matter what. There's something quietly noble about that. Humans want medals and speeches and a decent photo for the papers. Pigeons want seeds and somewhere dry to sit. And yet, if you're measuring by outcomes, the bird delivered. Now, the aftermath. Cherami didn't get a handshake and a pat on the head. She got a surgeon. Army medics patched her up. They even made a tiny wooden leg so she could hobble around. Then she was shipped back to the States, a national treasure in a small feathery package. She was awarded the French Croix de Guerre. If you're going to get a medal, you might as well get a stylish French one. And when she eventually died, they preserved her. You can go and see Cher Army on display, forever mid-story, this small, ordinary-looking pigeon that did something absolutely extraordinary. There's a bit of me that loves the contrast. On the one hand, we've got all the romance of old maps and trenches and plucky heroes. On the other, there's the practical, slightly ridiculous mechanics of it all. Someone had to sharpen a pencil, write legibly in the rain, roll the paper tight enough to fit in that tiny tube, tie it to a small bird who, 2 minutes earlier, might have been pecking at a stray crumb. War is absurd and deadly, and weirdly bureaucratic all at once. Did you log the outgoing pigeon? Serial number. What is it, 6B? Yes, the one with the attitude. And then there's the training. People imagine pigeons as chaos with wings, but homers are athletes. They train distance, navigation, returning to a specific loft. The bond is to home, not to a person. That's the magic. You can carry them away in a basket, set them free, and their brain, part magnet, part sun clock, part street map, just goes right. We're going back. If you've ever held a pigeon ready for release, you can feel this coiled spring in them. They're patient right up until the moment you open your hands. And then they're gone like an arrow. No dithering. It's almost rude, like you've said something offensive, and they've decided to leave. I find myself wondering about the personality of a bird, like cher ami. We project a lot onto animals: bravery, loyalty, stubbornness. But there is such a thing as temperament. Some are bold, some are cautious, some are, let's say, easily distracted by pastry. Maybe cher ami was the no-nonsense type, the one that never circled twice when once would do. In a loft full of birds, you'd notice that. The keeper would say, "That one's businesslike, good in a crisis, indifferent to compliments, the sort of colleague you want on a fire drill." And yes, of course, after this, you get the question, all right, would you do it? If you were the winged courier, would you fly into the storm? The honest answer is, I'd love to say yes, but I'd probably detour over a bakery, think about life for a bit, and then get distracted by a nice warm air current. This is why I'm not entrusted with battlefield messaging, or frankly, with anything that involves pressure and tiny tubes. What matters is that the system worked often enough to save lives. Pigeons carried hundreds of thousands of messages in the war. Not all of them were as dramatic as cher ami's flight, but each one was a thread stitching 2 points of chaos together. We're here. We need this. Stop firing. Simple, blunt, vital. And behind each short sentence was a chain of people, and one small bird doing exactly what it had been wired and trained to do. There's also something fitting about the name. Dear friend. It sounds sentimental until you're counting up who made it home because of that bird. Then it feels accurate. Not pal, not mate, not buddy, dear friend. The kind of friend who shows up when everyone else is stuck. The kind of friend who doesn't need a pep talk. The kind of friend who doesn't make it about them. If that's not the definition of dear, I don't know what is. And looping back to where we started, the mirror test. Self-awareness is a funny thing. You'd think recognizing your reflection would be the clever party trick, the one that means you're smart. But when you're weighed down with a scrap of paper and the whole point of your existence is to get it home, maybe the cleverest thing is to ignore all mirrors, all distractions, all noise, and aim for the one place you know. Not "that's me," just "that's the way." So, cher ami, small bird, big story. Next time you see one of her cousins doing that bobbing walk near the train station, looking slightly scruffy and a bit too confident, give it a moment. There's a chance you're looking at a creature with an internal compass, a decent memory for rooftops, and a work history that includes saving people under fire. And if it eyes up your sandwich, well, respect where it's due. heroes get hungry too. So after Sherami, you might be wondering, do animals actually get recognized for this kind of thing? I mean, we've got medals for humans. Big shiny bits of metal you pin to your chest. The whole ceremony. Maybe a parade if you're lucky. But what about the animals? You can't exactly pin a medal to a dog and have it go home and hang it in the study. Turns out, yeah, we do. There's an actual award for animal bravery called the Dickin Medal. It's often described as the Victoria Cross for animals, and it's not just some token ribbon you give for a cute rescue story in the local paper. This thing has been awarded for proper life-saving heroics. Dogs, horses, pigeons, even a cat. Yes, a cat. I'll get to him. It started during World War II, created by Maria Dickin. She founded the People's Dispensary for Sick Animals, the PDSA. She wanted a way to officially recognize the contribution animals made in wartime, which, when you think about it, is kind of brilliant. Because we talk about human sacrifice and bravery all the time, but animals have been in the thick of it for centuries. Horses pulling guns through mud, dogs carrying messages or finding wounded soldiers. Pigeons. Well, we've already covered the pigeon department. The medal itself is bronze, with the words "for gallantry" and "we also serve" on it. And I kind of love that wording. We also serve. It's humble, matter of fact, and oddly moving. These animals didn't sign up. They didn't volunteer. They just did what they were trained to do, or what instinct told them to. And sometimes that was enough to save lives. And the stories. Oh, there are some good ones. Dogs like Rip, a stray who became a search and rescue dog in the Blitz, finding over 100 people buried in rubble. Theo, a bomb detection dog in Afghanistan, who worked with his handler, Lance Corporal Liam Tasker. Horses like Warrior, who survived multiple battles in the First World War despite being wounded several times. Imagine the sheer stubbornness it takes to keep charging forward while the world explodes around you. But the one that always makes people stop and go, "Wait, what?" is Simon the cat. Simon served aboard the HMS Amethyst in 1949 during the Yangtze incident. That's when the British ship got caught up in the Chinese Civil War. The ship was trapped under constant fire, and the conditions were grim. And when I say grim, I mean supplies running low, morale running lower, and the place is overrun with rats. Not exactly the sort of situation you want to be in at the best of times, let alone when you're being shot at. Now, Simon wasn't your average ship's cat. He didn't just sit around looking decorative, maybe chasing the occasional shadow. No, Simon went on a one-cat crusade against the rats. And these weren't cute little storybook rodents. These were big, bold, this is our ship now types, eating what little food was left and spreading disease. Simon would stalk the decks at night, methodically hunting them down. One day during the fighting, the ship took a direct hit. The captain was killed, and Simon was badly injured. Shrapnel wounds, burns. Most cats in that situation would find the darkest corner possible and stay there. Not Simon. As soon as he was patched up, he went back to work, catching rats and keeping the infestation down. The crew swore it kept their spirits up, not just because he was protecting their food, but because it was this tiny act of normal life in the middle of chaos. When the ship finally escaped, Simon was a hero. He became the only cat ever to receive the Dickin Medal. Think about that for a second. One cat in the entire history of the award. That's a rare club. And here's the bit that always gets me. When the ship returned to the UK, Simon was quarantined, as all animals had to be back then. While in quarantine, he sadly died from complications of his injuries. But his medal and his story live on. His gravestone reads, "Throughout the Yangtze incident, his behavior was of the highest order," which is such a wonderfully understated, very British way of saying this cat was absolutely nails. There's something brilliant about that contrast. In a war zone with shells exploding and people dying, you've got this cat just doing his job. Stalking, pouncing, dragging rats out from under crates, completely unaware of the politics and strategy swirling around him. To him, the mission was simple: get rid of the rats. And he did it. I think that's why the Dickon Medal stories hit so hard. They're about competence without ego. None of these animals are in it for glory. They don't know they're being brave. They just do the thing in front of them. Whether that's delivering a message through enemy fire, sniffing out bombs, charging across a battlefield, or making sure the biscuits in the ship's tin aren't nibbled by rodents. And maybe that's why the wording, "we also serve," is so perfect. Because bravery isn't always about understanding the big picture. Sometimes it's about taking care of one small job over and over until the people around you can keep going. So, we've had pigeons in war, cats on ships. Let's launch a bit further, literally, and talk about the animals who went to space. Because here's the thing: before we risked sending humans up there, we wanted to know if it was survivable. Not just, can a machine make it, but what does weightlessness do to a living body? So the logical, if slightly questionable, solution was send animals first. And we're not talking a couple of token experiments here. The early space race was basically a Noah's Ark for science. Dogs, monkeys, tortoises, frogs, spiders, fish, even jellyfish. Imagine that. Somewhere in the archives, there's a mission report on behavior of jellyfish in microgravity. I don't know what the outcome was, but I like to think the entry just reads, "Jellyfish appears confused." The most famous of all is probably Laika, the stray dog from Moscow, who became the first living creature to orbit Earth. She was launched aboard Sputnik 2 in 1957. Now, Laika's story is, well, it's inspiring and a bit heartbreaking in equal measure. She didn't survive the mission. The technology for a safe return wasn't there yet. But her flight proved that a living being could endure the conditions of space, at least for a while. And that paved the way for human missions. I always think about the lead up to her flight. The Soviet scientists trained her to sit calmly in increasingly cramped spaces, taught her to eat special food from tubes, even exposed her to loud noises and rapid accelerations so she wouldn't panic during launch, which I suppose is better than just sticking an unprepared dog in a rocket. But still, somewhere in there, there's a photo of Laika sitting in her little capsule, looking calm, not scared, just watching the humans as if thinking, well, if you insist. And she's not alone in the Space Pet Hall of Fame. The Americans sent up rhesus monkeys, Albert I through Albert VI. Albert I didn't even make it to space. His rocket failed before hitting the right altitude. By Albert VI, they were getting better. But still, let's just say the Alberts had a rough time. Then there were chimps like Ham, who was trained to pull levers and push buttons during flight to test human-like tasks. He performed perfectly, though he did get splashed down in the ocean a little further off course than planned, which is the space race equivalent of being dropped off 5 streets from home in the rain. The French, not to be left out, sent up a cat named Felicette in 1963. She had electrodes implanted to measure brain activity during flight. After a short trip to the edge of space, she came back alive, which makes her a rare success story in these early tests. She's sometimes nicknamed the Astrocat, and I think if we're giving medals to pigeons and cats on ships, Felicette deserves an honorary spot in the club. Then you get the more niche experiments. Tortoises sent by the Soviets circled the moon on an uncrewed mission before humans ever did. Fruit flies were the very first animals launched by the US, which is one way to guarantee a small payload. And yes, jellyfish, NASA sent them up in the early 90s to study how weightlessness affected their ability to sense direction. Apparently, when they came back, the spaceborne jellyfish had trouble orienting themselves in Earth's gravity. Which means, technically, we have astronauts who got space legs instead of sea legs. The thing that fascinates me is how ordinary the animals looked doing it. There's a video of a monkey in a tiny spacesuit, strapped into a chair, calmly pressing buttons as if it's just another day in the office. And I suppose, for them, it kind of was. You train, you get treats, you do the thing you've been taught. The fact that you're hurtling above the earth at thousands of miles per hour isn't really part of your understanding. And in a strange way, that's the link to all the animal stories we've talked about so far. They don't overthink it. Pigeons don't agonize over the mission, they just fly home. Simon the cat didn't have a strategic plan for morale boosting. He just hunted rats. And Laika? She didn't give a TED talk about courage. She just sat in her capsule and did her job, even if she didn't know what space was. It's easy to see these as little footnotes to human achievement, the warm-up acts before the main show. But I think they deserve more than that. They were the first to face conditions we could only imagine, without any way of knowing the risks, and in some cases, without any way back. Which is a heavy thing if you think about it too long. There's a statue of Laika in Moscow now. It's not huge or flashy, just a bronze figure of her on top of a rocket-shaped monument. People leave flowers there. It's a reminder that the history of space travel isn't just about men in silver suits and moon landings. It's also about the animals who went first, paving the way quietly, without asking for anything in return. And who knows, maybe somewhere out there, on a distant planet, there's a plaque in alien script honoring the first Earth creature to visit space. And if there is, I hope it's got a paw print on it. So there we go. 4 little journeys, all linked by one quiet theme. Small creatures doing big things. A pigeon with the sense to find home through chaos. Another, battered and bleeding, still making it back with a message that saved lives. A ship's cat taking on a rodent army in the middle of a siege. And a handful of animals who looked up, or maybe didn't even realize they were looking up, and ended up in space. What I love about all of these is that none of them set out to be heroes. There was no grand speech, no moment of, right, this is my big break. They just did the thing they were made to do. Fly home, catch the rat, sit still in the capsule, and somehow Those small, ordinary acts rippled out into something extraordinary. It's easy to get caught up thinking that making a difference means doing something loud or world changing. But maybe the truth is, you just take care of the one job in front of you. And if that job happens to be delivering a message through enemy fire or being the first living thing to orbit Earth, well, that's just how your day went. So next time you see a pigeon bobbing about, or a cat curled up in the sun, or even a dog trotting alongside its person, just think, somewhere in their family tree might be a little thread of history, a moment where instinct, training, and sheer stubbornness met at the right time and place to change things. All right, that's enough for tonight. Thanks for keeping me company. We'll do this again soon. Different stories, new corners of history, same gentle wander through the curious side of life. For now, good night.